Welcome, everyone, to the Catholic Education Foundation podcast number 53.
Whoa.
Today, our special guest is Wally Dant, the founder of Distillery in Gethsemane, Kentucky, and as always, Rich Lecklider, the president of the Catholic Education Foundation. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hey, thank you for having us.
Wally, so listen, we're thrilled to have you on the show. So thankful for you for taking time to be with us today. And Rich, listen, there's so much to talk about today, including the amazing history of the Dant family in Nelson County, Kentucky.
Oh, yeah, there is. And I had the pleasure of going down and meeting Wally a few months ago at his place, and it's just a fascinating development at Logstill. We'll talk about it some more, and it's the affiliation or sort of historical connection with the Abbey at Gethsemane and some other things. It's really an awesome story. And Wally, thank you very much for your time today, for sure.
Well, again, thank you for having me.
Well, if you don't mind, we're going to start where we kind of start with all of our guests.
Sure.
Tell us about your early years.
Oh boy, my family is from here in Kentucky, and back in the late 1700s. My family, my dad grew up in the distillery property there in Gethsemane. My mom was about 2 miles away in New Hope, and so growing up, my dad worked for UPS, and so as everybody knows here in Louisville, UPS is, one of the largest, if not the largest employer, I think, in the city of Louisville. And so we bled brown and moved around. That's what you did in UPS land,
bled
right?
Brown and moved around. I like it.
And so every 3 or so years, we moved from, we previously started here in Kentucky, moved to Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Georgia.
Wow.
And then I graduated high school down in Georgia, and then I head to Purdue for college. And my dad eventually ended up over air operations for UPS here in Louisville on an international basis, and then that's where he retires here in Louisville. And in the meantime, I'm trying to forge my own path, outside of college, and I actually come here to U of L to get my MBA as soon as I get out of school.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually a forestry major from Purdue.
We were going to get to that. I've got to understand what was the career plans there.
Oh my goodness! You have these what maybe were little small dreams about what your career is supposed to be like when you start college, right? And then all of a sudden you go, oh. Wow. And forestry was one of those, oh, well.
I was going to say.
Sort of things. And I'm not saying I didn't have a great education at Purdue, because I did. I was just up there this past weekend. But for me, when you go into forestry, the thinking is, hey, I'm an outdoors guy. I love being outdoors,
sure.
And maybe I can be part of the Forest Service and things like that. And you get in and you go, hey, and they tell you, your chances when you graduate 4 years from now of finding a job are pretty small. And if you do, then you're going to be out in the middle of nowhere making, maybe $20,000 a year, right?
Right.
And, and I look at myself and I go, I don't think I can do that, right? It was just, I don't know if that's me.
Right.
And so I pivoted to what was then the business side of forestry. So forest products is what what was my kind of major at Purdue.
Okay.
And so I got this well-rounded business background and science background while getting my degree at Purdue. And then, you're at graduation time and you're like, okay, well, I can go to work in a wood manufacturing, furniture manufacturing sort of environment. And I really wanted to work at like a Weyerhaeuser or someone like that. And at the time, Weyerhaeuser or Louisiana Pacific, those big organizations were hiring MBAs. That's what they did. And they really wanted those guys with a master's in business. So.
Sure.
So U of L, my parents were here. U of L said, hey, come here. You can actually be a graduate assistant, go to school at night. And, as a graduate assistant, they paid your tuition. And you're like, well, this is pretty sweet, right? And so I start there, start getting my MBA, and there's a professor at Brown-Forman who worked at Brown-Forman and taught at the MBA school. And he said, "Hey, I need somebody to come work for me that wants to knows." Now, this is a precursor to Excel, knows Lotus 1, 2, 3.
Oh, yeah.
And that's my favorite to this day.
Yeah, I mean,
just ask around.
Yeah, well, I was really good at it. And he said, "You want to make $20 an hour?" And I thought, this is 1985, 86. And I said, yeah, that's me. Sure. Right? So literally, I've stumbled back into, our family's, old distilling background and go to work for Brown-Forman. I was in brand management there and human resources, and so that kind of was the initial start to my career here in Louisville. And then I did the same thing my dad did. I didn't bleed brown and move around, but I moved around, right? Mm-hmm. And so I went from Brown-Forman to what was then, Rich, you'll remember these guys. You've been in Louisville, Capital Holding, which became Providian, that became Aegon,
yep.
Right? All of those. Oh, yeah. And so I moved around with them a few different places, Pennsylvania and Georgia. And then it ended up back in Louisville in healthcare. And so then I spent the rest of my entire career right in the healthcare space, where I started my own companies in 2006.
So what was Brown-Forman? We're all more familiar with BF today than we ever were because of the boom. But what was it like being at Brown-Forman in 1986? What was that like?
They were a pretty diversified company, right? They had Hartman Luggage, they had Lenox China and Crystal, and then they had the spirits side to the business, and the beautiful consistency about Brown-Forman was the Brown family, and they're giving to this community, and when you talk about funds for the arts and all of what they've done for this town, and how they pass that on to their employees, was a pretty cool thing to see and witness. And so they kind of set the tone for me, later in life. The Frist family with HCA. Rich, I know you're familiar with them, yeah. Right? They were very similar to the Browns, except they were, again, focused around Nashville, Tennessee. And so those two families really kind of set the tone for me in my career in setting my companies up and making sure that we were always community focused, that we were always trying to give back, have our employees involved in the community, because it means something. And so that, whether it was in my healthcare or in my distilling business today, it's meaningful for us to work with the communities that surround us, that supply employees to us, that that are ultimately buy our products. So
you said HCA, which is a home care business, correct? Like home health care.
Mine was, yeah. So I worked there. I was in a division of home health. We were in the it was a big hospital company, right? So
you worked there,
here,
right?
Yeah. So back in the day, HCA was a pioneer in hospitals.
Right.
Started out in the late '60s, I think, went public about the same time Humana did. The Frist family was the founders of the company, just like the Jones family and the Cherry family here with Humana.
Yep.
Kind of similar paths. And then Wally got into the business when they expanded into the home care business.
Okay.
So it was primarily a hospital-driven business that expanded into all these other things. I'll let Wally talk about that because the company changed quite a bit. Why don't you talk about that? Because we were actually both there. We never crossed paths, amazingly.
Yeah.
Was you there at the same time?
Yeah.
Well, but you're talking, like at its zenith, right? HCA had 300,000 employees, and they were practically speaking, in almost all 50 states. Hospitals, home health care companies, ambulatory surgery centers. I mean, you name it, they were doing it. And Rick Scott, who is now Senator Rick Scott out of Florida, was a CEO at the time and put all of these companies together. And so, in the late 90s, there were some issues around some government payments, so on and so forth. We could talk all night long around that, but I don't want to bore anybody around that. But anyway, so Tommy Frist comes back in as CEO of the company, and Tommy looks around and says, I know hospitals, right?
He knew them very well.
He knew hospitals. He knew them really well, but he didn't know all these other ancillary businesses, and said, hey, I just want to focus us back on the hospital world. And so my division was put up for sale.
Okay.
And so, we sold it. Stayed there and stayed on afterwards, worked through some of the transitions, but also did some of the managed care contracting, like with Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Humana, right, on, what it means to stay in a hospital, how much it costs, and all those sort of things, right? So I did that, and eventually I just said, I'd like to go kind of start my own thing. Our company, and Rich knows, a lot of our people went off to start other businesses in the healthcare space, and so so
it was your turn.
It was my turn, right? It was my turn in the shoot, and I did that in the home health and hospice space.
And that was called Suncrest Healthcare.
That's correct. Yep.
So you created that. So you co-founded that in 2013?
No, that was 2006. Yeah.
Oh, you sold it in 2013.
I sold it in 2013. Yeah.
So was that just a flat startup? I mean, from nothing, or what was
that? Yeah. But we basically went out and bought 2 small home health licenses, right? One in North Florida in Jacksonville, and the other one in Nashville. And started it out from nothing. We grew it to about $110 million, and sold
in a very short period of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, then I recognize this name. You also co-founded My Nexus.
Yeah, I did.
Which you recently sold to Anthem.
Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield. Yeah. Yep.
I mean, Wally, that sounds like another winner.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that too.
Well, coming out of the Suncrest experience, we knew as what we call providers, right? So we were a provider organization. We had employees that went out and saw patients in the home. Well, with the My Nexus, knowing that we knew how to manage those patients, we went to Medicare Advantage providers, because mostly home health is delivered to elderly that are generally Medicare eligible, and so we went to those providers and said, hey, we can manage your members through those services, and we think we can save you money in doing that. And so we did what we call at-risk contracts, and we did that for Anthem, Humana, United, Cigna, and Aetna, and all of the big ones.
Yeah.
And so we did that pretty successfully, and eventually sold that to Anthem Blue Cross.
Fantastic.
So.
I mean, all right, Wally, let's give our listeners some real world advice here.
Yeah.
Talk to our audience about what it takes to start a business and grow it into a successful enterprise.
A lot of prayers.
Is luck involved in this at all?
There's always a point where I think we almost say it on one of our bottles about make your own luck. Create the opportunities, and if you create the opportunities for good things to happen, you can call it luck if you want. But if you create the right opportunities, the right environment, and there's always something about timing as well. You could look at my bourbon business today and my distilleries and everything that we do and say, well, when you started it, which was in 2018, great time to be kind of up and growing into the bourbon business, and you go through this big boom time with COVID,
right? And
then we've all come off of that COVID high, and everybody's looking around and going, well, bourbon business is way off today, right? That actually, it's not just bourbon; it's really the beverage alcohol space is just way different than it was before. And you go, well, that was the wrong time, right? But at the end of the day, it's really about creating something that's going to last.
Sure.
And we think we've done that with our distillery back on our old family grounds. That was established back in the 1860s. Originally, our distillery was, and so you're creating something for that community that can be a part of that community long past me.
Pretty impressive stuff here.
Very, very impressive. And the connection again, going back home to where his family roots were.
Right. Well, you paved your own way first there, Wally, which is cool. You know, you did your own thing, made your own success, and then now you're kind of back into the family business a little bit, which I think's awesome. So you also owned and operated a Tennessee-based spirits distributor, Bonus Bev.
Bonus Bev, yep.
So that was your re-entry back into the spirits industry?
Yeah, so on the sides of those healthcare businesses, I thought, hey, it would be fun to be in the spirits business, and so I actually ran. We had a small retail store first, a couple of partners and I did, and had that for about 5 years, and then sold that, and then in 2013 or so started a wine and spirits distribution business in Nashville. And so in the distribution business, you're dealing with suppliers like Log Still, for instance, or Brown-Forman or somebody like that, and you're taking their products and actually getting them into retailers or restaurants' hands in order for them to be able to sell to consumers, because it's kind of the three-tier system, right? And so we were doing that on a statewide basis in Tennessee, representing new brands, and one of those brands was a Kentucky Bourbon brand that's in downtown Louisville and Nulu today, and so having a great relationship with Kaveh Zamanian, Kaveh and I became really good friends because we were representing them in Tennessee, and he looked at me and said, you got the great family story, why aren't you doing this for yourself? And so he kind of planted that seed, and about 2 years later, after we planted the seed, I said, well, sure, why not?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Right?
Let's go after this. All right, so before we get into the Log Still Distillery, tell us a little bit more about your family roots in Nelson County, Gethsemane in particular, because your family has a deep connection, and you mentioned it just again, but what is that family story?
Yeah, our family came over in Maryland in the late 1700s. I think we were actually the second group that Basil Hayden led over from Maryland, and settled right there in the Catholic. Everybody calls it the Catholic Holy Land.
Yeah, the Holy Land.
Right,
Yep.
And settled there. So Marion County was, Holy Cross was there. Kind of the first church kind of was established, but everybody came over. Settled into that Nelson, Marion kind of area, and so our family did that. We settled in that Marion County area, and so then they started kind of spreading out from there. So, a number of Dants went over to live in the Gethsemane area, and it probably wasn't called Gethsemane back then. It was probably, who knows what it was called. I don't think, maybe the city of New Haven was founded then, but our little section of Nelson, I don't think it was called Gethsemane yet. But they settled over in that area. A number of them did, and one of them began a distilling operation, which was called Cold Spring Distillery, and that's on the 300 so acres that we have today. There was another distillery there that was DSP number 47, which is our license number. It was actually started by a head down there, a Head family, Francis Marion Head, good old Catholic names. And so they started our distillery in 1860s. My great uncle, who owned Cold Spring, buys it pre-Prohibition because he needed a bigger operation. So his brand, which you guys have seen on the shelf today, was called Yellowstone.
Okay.
Right? And so Yellowstone was originally by Joseph Bernard Dant, and
Wow.
And so that was his original brand, started in the 1880s, owned it, and he continued to own it and operate it pre-Prohibition, post-Prohibition. He starts his new distillery up in Louisville, and my great grandfather buys the old distillery down in Gethsemane. And so my great-grandfather kind of starts his company, and his name was Will Dant, and he starts his company, and his oldest son, which is my grandfather, goes down and works for him. Built his house there on the distillery property. Right. My dad's born and raised on the distillery property. My grandmother, my dad's mom, walked 30 yards down the driveway to
Mhm.
her work was at
Mhm.
the train depot, right? So
Mhm.
she was an L&N depot master, Louisville Nashville Railroad for those
Sure.
that wouldn't know L&N. And she was also the postmistress, right?
Okay.
So I think she had 13 to 15 mailboxes out there at the time. And, just, but, and she retires, as an L&N employee. But, they're living out in that community. And then, once my dad had me and the rest of his kids, we'd all kind of drive back down to Gethsemane to my
Right.
grandfather's house. And, I ran around on that old distillery as a kid and continued to do so all the way through, college. Because while my grandparents had passed on my dad's side, my mom side, my grandmother, actually had built a house, less than a quarter of a mile up the road from my grandfather's house.
Okay. Yep.
Right. So, every Easter, right, every Christmas, we'd all go back to to her house, have a big Easter dinner, and then we'd go run around on the distillery
Mhm.
property because
Sure.
it was still standing at
Yeah.
the time. So, yeah.
But you all also had, I think I read this, where your family at some point donated some property on which the Gethsemane, the Abbey of Gethsemane, sits today, right? So there's a whole connection to sort of a world famous place now, the Abbey of Gethsemane, and how you all were instrumental in sort of starting that.
Well, yeah, I mean, the cool thing is that back in the late 1800s, a number of the Dants owned a lot of land in and around Gethsemane, and one of them, or a couple of them, actually said, "Hey, we'd like you to build a girls' school," because women weren't as well educated as men, and so they said, "Hey, we'd like you to build a girls' school," and they actually gave the land to the Sisters of Loretta to build a girls' school, and so they did that on the Gethsemane, the Abbey property, and that was in the early 1800s that they did that, and then years later, the sisters actually sell that school and property to the Trappists to build the Abbey of Gethsemane. And so we all like to think, as you kind of go back that lineage, that we had certainly our family had a strong hand in helping to establish all of the I think the great works that come out of that Catholic Holy Land. And
Yep.
when you think about the archdiocese today and the diocese that was formed originally out there, the Diocese of Bardstown, and kind of how it's grown and how the Catholic population has flourished over 200 years here in Kentucky. And everybody, when you're not living in Kentucky, most people go as a southern state, and Protestant or Baptist would be the religion that you would think of. And not many people would ever think that Bardstown and the Diocese of Bardstown was like the third or tied for third from a diocese perspective in the United States of America.
Yeah, in 1808, if I've got this right, the Bardstown was the furthest diocese west in the United States. So it was New York, Baltimore,
Yep.
Philadelphia,
Mm-hmm.
Bardstown. Those were the
Wow.
4 dioceses in the United States in 1808.
Yeah.
So literally the Holy Land, where all this took place
Bardstown.
in Nelson County, in Marion County, that was a springboard for the Catholic Church, basically, in what was then sort of the Western United States.
Oh yeah,
if you
yeah,
will.
that's right. Yep.
Yeah, it's a great story. So to have your family connected with all that sort of origin, particularly around Gethsemane, I think it's awesome.
So, Wally, you maybe hit on some of this, but what's the inspiration behind Log Still Distillery and the Log Still campus development?
For us, first for me and my family, it was really kind of getting back home.
Yeah.
Right. So, kind of going back to our origins,
The roots.
Those were really important to me. So, when I said, "Hey, I'm going to start this distillery," and where do you want to do it? You begin looking. You do site locations and things like that, and say, you talk with economic development people. I did that with folks in Marion County and Nelson County. Did a little bit of that in Tennessee, which is where I was living at the time. And I thought it would be great to have have a Kentucky bourbon again and kind of get back to that area. So I began working really earnestly with those two counties, just trying to decide where we were going to put it. And at the same time, my family grew up there in Gethsemane or New Hope, and so I called up my aunt at the time. And so we say aunt instead of aunt. We're in Kentucky here, so let's make sure we do this properly. And I called her up and I said, who is on the old distillery grounds? Because there was a roofing truss company that was located on it. And she goes, well, as a matter of fact, I just delivered communion to his house just this past week. And the guy's name was J.W. Nally, and so J.W. was a strong Catholic in the New Haven community there, and he was a widower and then had remarried again, and he happened to marry, Estelle Dant, Estelle Dant Nally, and Estelle was from New Hope and had married a Dant, and so they were kind of co-owners of this trust company there, and she goes, well, you want me to put me in contact with them? So I said, well, yeah, that'd be great if you could. And so I called them up, and went to meet with them, and then had a discussion with her son Charles afterwards, and I just said, this is kind of what I'd like to do. I think I'd like to come back on the old distillery grounds, buy it, and see what we can't do with it, right? So what we can't do with the idea of putting a distillery back on the old distillery grounds.
All right. So I'm always fascinated by these stories. Tell us about the historical significance in naming your bourbon product Monk's Road.
Yeah. As we talked a little bit before about the Abbey, right, being there, and the road that's in front of the Abbey is it's called Monk's Road.
Okay, all right.
Right, it is called Monk's Road. It's Kentucky, maybe it's Kentucky 247 or something like that, but everybody calls it Monk's Road, and so every time my family is on Monk's Road heading to my grandfather's or my grandmother's, we knew we were close to home, right? So it meant something from that perspective. And then with the tie-ins with the Dant family, my ancestors giving that land, eventually becoming the Abbey out there, I just thought, if you're looking for genuine stories around why bourbon guys like me, name our brands around something that's genuine, right? That has a family connection, that means something, that gives you a sense of place. Those were the things why we chose the Monk's Road name. And it was another way, for us to extend our faith.
Sure.
Right? So you find Easter eggs that we have located on our bottles that are Catholic in nature.
Okay.
Right? And not so overly overt to kind of be in your face, but just to give you something to talk about if you kind of.
All right.
Really
Well, now you got to give us an example.
So, you got the fleur-de-lis, which is everybody knows the fleur-de-lis is actually, around the Trinity, right? And so you use that fleur-de-lis. We use that a lot in our it's even on, the Archdiocese uses it quite a bit. But it's actually on our bottles. We actually have some Latin written on our bottles on the top of the Monk's Road bottles that says Pax Tibi, right? And so peace be with you, right? And so there's things that we've tried to incorporate into our stuff that it is kind of what we call universal, right?
Sure.
It's peace is a universal aspect, I think. And quite frankly, in the news a lot these days.
Yeah.
Amen.
Okay, so what is your vision on the Log Still campus? Because and I don't know that it can be just about bourbon anymore, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it has to have a tourism piece to it. So what's your vision there?
Yeah, When we started Log Still, we said, look, how do we get people out into, a lot of people think, you go outside of Louisville and you're out in the middle of nowhere, right?
Absolutely.
And in many respects, you're out in the middle of nowhere, right? But we said, how do we get people to come out, stay with us a while, and then want to come out again?
Mm-hmm.
Because, while I've been around the bourbon industry for quite some time with whether it was at Brown-Forman or my distribution company, you go on a distillery tour, you'll get to see the still working, you get to see a fermenting tank, and then you buy a bottle and leave. Okay. Well, how many times are you going to do that? Right. And say, well, I've been there, done that.
Right.
And so my thinking around the development of Log Still was, let's create something different. Let's create maybe the first bourbon resort. And so we said, hey, let's give people a place to stay. We were blessed with some great houses around the property, some of which were part of the old distillery, some of which were a part of my family,
Mm-hmm.
some of which others owned. But to create a place where people can come out and stay. And if you're on the bourbon tour, on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, and you're out there visiting, well, why not stay on some distillery property?
Love it.
And so that was part of the idea around it. Music, nothing goes better, I think, with bourbon than some great music.
Mm-hmm.
And so, being out in Nashville, music was so plentiful down in that community, and such a big draw for Nashville in general, right? People come to see
Sure.
all of the great music acts that you can see. And practically speaking, you can go down anywhere in Nashville, see great artists for pretty cheap to next to nothing, and people that are trying to make it. And so
your server at your restaurant is an unbelievable musician. You just never knew it. I went to Belmont University.
Oh, yeah?
So
All right.
I know that's all too well.
Yeah. And so, we said, hey, how can we do that? And how can we do it in a way that we can have great artists
Mm-hmm.
come and not only experience, but give people something that they just can't find anywhere else. And so that's why we built the amphitheater out there, the 2,500
So
seat
cool.
amphitheater.
Yeah,
And I think
very
today we just announced a pre-sale on Jamie Johnson. So Jamie
let's go.
Johnson's going to be out there on September 11th.
Nice.
Right? So I think it's the 25th anniversary of September 11th?
It would be.
This year, right?
It would be.
And the 250th year anniversary for the United States, right? And so we've got Jamie Johnson, a great patriotic artist that's going to be out there. And so when you can create those things, we've got an event and conference center out there where we've hosted now Salt and Light, right?
Yeah,
part of the Archdiocese.
Yep.
And
Part
we've
of the
done that.
CSA.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. And we've done that for maybe 2 or 3 years now. But we've created these things, right, to create great memories. People go, I had a great time out there. I want to go out there again.
Mhm.
And so that's really what we've tried to do is to create something that nobody else has done before, and really help everybody that's in the bourbon business, right, have somebody to come back to again and go, hey, I need to go there. And when I go there, I'm going to go visit the next distillery, or I'm going to go a mile down the road and go to the Abbey.
Sure.
Right? And, reconnect back with my faith. And I think those are the cool things that I think we've all tried to do with Log Still.
Wally, for all the success you've had in your career, how does how's it stack up?
It's probably the hardest thing I've ever done.
That doesn't surprise me.
I thought I knew this business pretty well, but we operate in such a unique environment that people, if you're in the business, you understand what I'm talking about. If you don't, what you're dealing with here is like, it's not like I can own like a McDonald's franchise, right? So if I'm a McDonald's franchisee, I buy my stuff from a distribution company, food distribution company that comes in, maybe McDonald's supplies it, or not. And then I get to sell my product to a consumer.
Right.
Well, with us, we make it.
Yeah.
Right. And then I've got to rely on the second tier, which is my distribution network, to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
And then those people that the distribution network sells it to, which are the retailers and or restaurants, then in turn get to sell it to a consumer. So like for me as a new brand, and trying to get the word out about Log Still and Monks Road and who we are, and it's really hard for a $15 an hour employee at the retail level to remember, all of the things that we are, who we are, what we're all about. And as opposed to going, hey, I know Jack Daniels, I know Jim Beam, I know all of these brands that have been in existence for a long, long time. And it's really easy to go, my grandfather drank it, my dad drank it.
Right.
I'm just going to buy that and not try, some of the new stuff that's out there. And so that whole dynamic is for smaller distillers is hard. And so that's why we created the campus that we did. So we'd get to be well known. That's why we went down to downtown Louisville on Whiskey Row, right next to the Center, to create Monks Road Boiler House, right? The restaurant and the tasting room, so that, when people are here, they go, oh yeah, well, they've got a distillery down 45 minutes south.
Got it.
And so I'm going to go visit them. Maybe not this time, but I'll go visit them the next time. But I'm going to remember them when I go buy it in a retail store. And so that whole world, and while I was, hey, Wally, you were in the distribution business. You should have known. Well, yes, I was. and I still underswung. Still didn't do myself justice.
I understand.
Well, the bourbon industry in the last, I think probably in the early 80s may have been at its bottom.
Yeah, that's right.
And look at what happened over the next 40 to 45 years. Nobody would have made that bet. So there was so much more product development, startups, in addition to the folks that have been in the business for decades.
Yeah.
And the business has completely changed.
Yeah, it's completely different.
Yeah, it is. It's
well,
exciting.
I mean, in many respects, it was a lot more fragmented, right? And there's been just a plethora of consolidation over the years. Whether it's like Maker's Mark, right? An independent company for a number of years gets bought and gets sold, and great people that work there. Bill Samuels Jr. is a dear friend of mine, and but there's consolidation in the supplier side, which is my side. There's been consolidation in the distribution side. So all of that consolidation, while in many respects good for a number of folks, it just makes it a lot more difficult for smaller companies like mine to get attention, right?
Yep.
And it's all about getting attention.
Yeah, getting the eyeballs.
That's right.
Rich, it sounds like there's another St. X connection here, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
right.
So your father, is that correct? St. X grad, 1958?
1958 St. X grad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a tiger.
Yeah.
Back in the old building on Broadway.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my grandparents who lived in Gethsemane actually. So Dad spent 2 years down in New Haven going to school, high school, and his dream was to go to Notre Dame.
Okay.
And my grandmother's dream was for him to go to Notre Dame, and so she sent him up to live with his grandparents, my great-grandparents who were in Louisville at the time, so that he could have an opportunity to go to Notre Dame.
Wow.
And so he took the train, or they drove him up, and he stayed and lived with his grandparents up off of Cecil Avenue on the west side of Louisville.
I know where it is.
And went to St. X and eventually found his way to Notre Dame.
And then eventually found his way into the church.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, talk about that, Wally. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, so like his grandmother's dream for him, he was the oldest grandson, my dad was, My grandmother had 13 kids. My
Wow.
great-grandmother had 13 kids.
Sounds like Rich's
And
family.
so my grandfather, who was the oldest, his son, my dad, was the oldest grandson. And her dream was always have, a number of religious folks,
Sure.
join the church. And actually, one beat my father to it. So my dad eventually became a priest after my mom passed away. But Father Bob Stumple, I don't know if you guys know
Yeah.
Bob, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
But we call him Bobby. We all grew up calling him Bobby, but Father Bob, made it into the church first on the Dant side, and his mother was a Dant, my grandfather's sister, Martha, and so Bobby was actually the first ordained, right, of her grandchildren, and then years later, my dad in 2002 is ordained a deacon out at and he was at St. Aloysius out in Pee Wee Valley. And literally about 6 months later, my mom passes away suddenly, and so he looks at all of us following her death and says, there were 5 of us kids, and he goes, I think I'd like to continue on and become a priest, and so just coming out of the diaconate program, Archbishop Kelly was the archbishop at the time,
Yep.
and so we supported our dad in that process, writing letters to the archbishop asking, because he was older, he's in his 60s, and asking for him to be considered, for the holy orders, and so they say yes, and they send my dad up to Hales Corner, Wisconsin, right outside of Milwaukee, where they specialized. That seminary actually specialized in folks that had either been widowers, and or folks that had their marriage annulled.
Which makes sense not to have to go with kind of the younger
crowd, right? And so Dad, developed great friends up there. And I was just at Purdue this past weekend. Just really crazy stories. So St. Tom's, which is the campus church up there, a Catholic church up at Purdue's campus, celebrating their 75th anniversary. And one of the women that were coming through, one of the couples that were coming through, sees my name tag, and she goes, "Well, there can't be too many Wally Dants out there." She goes, "My brother went through seminary, right, with a Wally Dant, and we met him a couple of times. Do you know who he is?" And I said, "Well, yes, of course."
Yeah,
right?
I sure do.
And, so it's just a small world, these small connections. He's actually he's a priest now, I think, up in Jasper, Indiana. And but, just great stories that you hear over the course of time. But, my dad became a priest. His first assignment was at St. Augustine's down in Lebanon. And then from there he went to be pastor at St. Thomas and St. Monica there in Bardstown.
Yep.
Golly, what a story.
I mean, think about that. You raise 5 kids.
Yeah.
You're married 40-something years.
You become a deacon.
And you're an executive at UPS,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, right.
And then you shift gears like that, become a deacon, and then a Roman Catholic priest. That's a life.
That is
That's a life.
Well, he had all the sacraments.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
He hit it all.
He hit them all. And
not many people could say that either.
Not many people can. And, the cool thing is for him, right, I think it gave him a great sense of purpose and fulfillment.
Sure.
That had been instilled in him from his grandmother, right? He kind of fulfilled her wishes, right?
Absolutely.
So that was the cool thing, and so for us, in witnessing that, and then when he passed away, to hear all the parishioners that came up with stories about my dad and how he had helped them through whatever times that they were going through, was probably the cooler thing, right? Because he grew up with some of those parishioners, right?
When he can probably relate a little bit more because he's lived it, but we won't come there.
Well, that's right.
All right. So, throughout your family's history, Catholic faith and your values,
we're all trying to discern some things.
We are
lives,
all
right?
trying, and that's the truth. Wally, how has your faith helped you form your life and career?
My faith is the most important touchstone that I have, and the great thing about it, we just went through Mercy Sunday. I think this past weekend.
Yeah, last weekend. Yes,
and the ability to receive grace and forgiveness, right? I'm a pretty broken man. There would be people that would say, "Hey, you've gone through. I've gone through a divorce, gone through an annulment before, and I haven't." But to be able to offer things up from a Christ perspective and be able to seek absolution and grace when we need it is probably the coolest thing about the Catholic faith that I don't think people really understand,
mm-hmm.
and understand that he died for our sins so that we can live again, right? And I think having that touchstone in my faith life is probably the most important thing that I have, I think, and to then I said this at Purdue this past weekend. Our jobs here on earth are to help others get to heaven, whether it's my family or my friends or people that I don't know, is to pass something on to them that helps them get there. And so, like our bourbon here, and I talked about it, I think, with the record, when we did something with the record, is if whether, and we talk about the faithfully crafted here, the Archdiocese bottles. If you can have a conversation with maybe a non-Catholic, non-Christian, or a Christian, and have a conversation. Wow, that's pretty cool. What's that all about? And you can actually have some dialogue around your faith journey. I think it's probably the thing that we can do over bourbon, right? Because hopefully it'll relax you a little bit, allow you to speak freely and openly about your faith. And I think those are the things that I value about our Catholic faith. And we're here. We're supposed to be talking a little bit about the Catholic Educational Foundation, right?
That's right.
And what I was raised as I grew up, depending on what state we were bleeding brown in. I either went to a Catholic school or a public school, and we did that depending on where we were. And my own children. Some spent time in Catholic schools, some spent them in public education, again, depending on where we were. But my last two went, and because literally we did not move once I settled into Tennessee, my last two youngest children went all the way through Catholic school in Tennessee. And I've got a son that's graduating from Father Ryan.
Yep. I was going to guess Father Ryan.
This May,
Excellent
right?
school.
This May.
Yeah.
And so for me, and being back in the New Haven, New Hope area, we have two elementary schools down in our area, very small. We got St. Catherine's and we got St. Anne's out in Howardstown.
Yep.
And, we support them. Log still supports them. I support them personally because, again, passing along those fundamentals of faith in children, and having them live that through, their journey as they grow up and become confirmed and live outside of is, I think the coolest thing. I attended your all's the banquet here.
Yeah, in March.
March,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, salute.
And that salute was something else. I mean, congratulations, Rich, on you guys.
Pretty cool.
Thank you.
Doing what you do there, because to be able to offer assistance to families in need, for them to be able to send their children to to Catholic schools is the greatest gift, I think, that the Archdiocese and the Educational Foundation can do, because it just gives them that great base of faith that they'll continue to have and touchstone in their entire life. And while we all stray and then come back, I know, we all go, hey, well, I don't need to go to church this weekend. I've got all of these plans going on. And, but when you're living it and you're breathing it through your education and remembering, okay, this is what this means to be a Catholic. This is what it means to be a Catholic Christian, and making sure that we provide for others, is I think a really great thing that you all are doing here with the the Catholic Education Foundation, is giving everybody that opportunity, creating that opportunity for families to treasure for the rest of their life.
So, Wally, you mentioned the schools you support in Bardstown. You guys aren't the only one. Rich, you guys, Catholic Education Foundation knows a little bit about that.
Yeah, we love all 39 of our elementary schools, 10 of which are outside of Jefferson County. And I think it's important for us, no matter where the school is, no matter where that family is, and they reach out to us every day.
That's right.
Okay, it's not something that just starts and stops. And I think we've done a nice job with the schools in Nelson County,
right.
Marion County, Lebanon, and we're investing in those kids like never before, and we're proud of it.
That's
Super proud of it.
That's right. All right, Wally, listen, we've taken up a ton of your time. You never seem to slow down. So my last question for you is what's next?
Retirement. It's I'd like to think, right, as we move through our journey here at Log Still and my own journey, is that giving back is probably the biggest thing that I would tell you we should all be focused on.
Sure.
And particularly those of us that are later in our life cycles. And as you stare at your time here, what's left of it on Earth, and then hopefully what's beyond it, you look at it and say, okay, what are the things that I can do to really bring faith, God, community, all back together again, and I think those are the things that I look forward to working on. I don't have a plan. You look at Rich and all the work that he's done and how he's continued on with that by giving back.
That's
with
right.
the Catholic Educational Foundation as president of the organization, and I know you've been involved for years and years and years. But you look at that and you go, those things, right? Those things matter, and to give it the nudge and the push and the ability to carry on, I think is, what I look forward to doing.
Well, you're such a great example of a Catholic man. And on behalf of everyone at the foundation, thank you for everything you've done, for your great works, all you do for the Nelson County community. And Rich, as every Catholic school family in need now knows, at the Catholic Education Foundation,
The answer is yes.
ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. We'll be back again next month with another engaging guest. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Give us a like, give us a comment. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Wally. God bless you.
No, thank you. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Teague.